So today, President Trump will host the president of El Salvador at the White House. The two are expected to discuss Trump's push to deport criminal migrants like the ones the administration already sent to the mega prison in El Salvador. Meantime, the Department of Justice says that the courts have no authority to order the administration to return the deported Maryland man back to the United States. Joining us now, the Homeland Security Secretary, Kristi Noem. Welcome, Madam Secretary. Thank you for joining us this morning.
Thank you for inviting me, Lawrence.
So, Madam Secretary, I'm enjoying this showdown because the Supreme Court essentially gave the courts some authority as it relates to coming up with an agreement, but it didn't say that the court could do foreign policy. In your latest filing, I found something very interesting from it. This is you, the plaintiff. This is your court filing. It says the plaintiff invite the court to exceed its own authority in the precise sort of way the Supreme Court cautioned them again. This court should decline that invitation. So it's saying if you keep getting out of line, then we'll just let the Supreme Court deal with you. Is that y'all's position?
Yes, I think that what the Supreme Court said here in this decision was a very clear message to other judges across this country, is that stop acting like you have the authority to dictate foreign policy and national security decisions that the president is making to protect its citizens. So this was just one of those examples of an individual that, was an MS-13 gang member, had multiple charges and encounters with the individuals here. Trafficking in his background, was found with other MS-13 gang members, very dangerous person. And what the liberal left and the fake news are doing to turn him into a media darling is sickening. We need to stop doing this, stop allowing liberal judges to try to dictate what President Trump is doing to make America safe again. So I'm grateful for the Supreme Court's decision, and I'm hopeful that we can have a new path forward where the president and his powers are recognized.
This judge has said that he wants daily updates. Yeah. I mean, shouldn't we be focused on the updates of the American people on the day-to-day that are being victimized by these criminal aliens?
Absolutely. That's what we get up every single day to make sure that we are doing, Lawrence. It's amazing what President Trump has already done by closing down the border, making sure we're enforcing our federal laws, doing all we can to identify those that are in this country that don't belong here, that are committing crimes, and we're continuing to enact policies that will give us the chance to do that. You've had quite a bit of discussion on Real ID and its implementation here in the country, and the reason that Real ID is being enforced is because it's a federal law. Joe Biden kicked the can to May 7th, and this Real ID is going to just empower the states to make sure we're checking people's residences. Their current legal status will be verified. We're going to make sure that people who are getting Social Security numbers in this country aren't voting in states. The states have the power and the information to ensure election integrity. And here at the federal level, that information is not going to be any biometric information. It'll just allow people to get an ID that they should be on our planes. They should be people that are United States residencies, and that legal status will be checked. So it'll allow us to get more information to states so that they're making sure that they're protecting their election laws as well.
So, Madam Secretary, what's the confusion on this? Because I've heard some women say that this is very difficult for them. I actually checked. Apparently, in the state of Texas, I already have a real ID. I didn't even know it was given to me.
Yeah, it's interesting, Lawrence. You know, some of the most conservative states are the first ones to put it in place because they recognized. South Dakota was the first state to do it. Florida, Texas. We already have 81% compliance of all travelers already have a real ID. And already use it. So that's why TSA is working so hard to educate people ahead of the deadline to get that other small percentage educated so that it can be operated and put into place smoothly to ensure that people who are on traveling in our country, that we know who they are, that they live here, that we know what their legal status is, and that we can make sure we share that information and states have that information. We want the states to be compliant in this, which is a database that they have access to that the federal government doesn't use for any purposes.
So, Madam Secretary, Antonio Gracias, who works under Elon Musk, is reportedly going to lead this specialized Doge immigration task force to help you develop some infrastructure within your department. What can you tell us about that?
Well, I've met Antonio, and he's brilliant. He's going to be working to make sure that individuals who got Social Security numbers in this country should be using them for the right things, and they shouldn't be on our benefit programs. You know, we have over 6,000 individuals that have been identified through their work already that have been on the terrorist watch list, that they are known criminals.
How does that happen, Madam Secretary? How does that happen?
It happens when you put a train wreck like Joe Biden in the White House, and it's going to be a lot of work to clean it up. But just in the last 4.5 years, we've had over 9 million people get Social Security numbers that are not U.S. citizens. So they may be people who have some sort of legal status, but a lot of them are illegals that were given a Social Security number in just the last 4.5 years. That we're going to have to figure out if they should be here, if they are here legally under a program, and if they are here illegally, then they certainly shouldn't be using that Social Security number to be on our programs, and they should be removed or given the opportunity to go home on their own. That's the one thing President Trump would like, is everybody to be given the opportunity to go home if they would wish to.
And real quickly, I only got about 30 seconds, Madam Secretary. This meeting between the El Salvadorian president and President Donald Trump, does that indicate that the flights will continue, that the deportation, that you guys aren't going to allow the courts to stop you?
Well, I think the conversation is going to be extremely beneficial. El Salvador's been a fantastic partner, and when I was in El Salvador visiting with President Bukele, we talked about the fact that he would accept more flights, would accept more individuals into CCOT. So I'm looking forward to that partnership continuing.
Secretary Kristi Noem, thank you so much for joining the program.
Yes, thank you, Lawrence.
Appreciate you.
So, Peter, is El Salvador's president open to receiving more criminal migrants to come to his notorious mega prison?
Yes, Sandra, and that is the backbone of this newly blossoming relationship between the United States and El Salvador.
We're a great country, but we had stupid people running this country, and I can say it. But what they've done to us at the border should never and can never be forgotten. It's a sin, what they did, and you are helping us out, and we appreciate it.
Anybody who is anybody that could help get Kilmar Abrego Garcia back to the U.S. is in the Oval Office right now. The Supreme Court wants the White House to help facilitate his return after that lower court ruled he was wrongfully deported. But it's not going to happen. White House officials say he was determined years ago to be a gang member, and the El Salvador president says releasing him doesn't make sense for either country, so he won't.
Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
So you could release him inside El Salvador?
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country.
This is the first day in weeks since Liberation Day that tariff talk has not completely dominated the conversation here as you go down tent by tent on the North Lawn. But it did come up. President Trump said a few minutes ago there will soon be new tariffs on pharmaceutical imports. Sandra.
Peter Ducey at the White House with the news for us. Peter, thank you. For more on that, let's bring in Jonathan Fahey, former acting ICE director and former DHS Deputy Assistant Secretary. Thank you so much for joining us, sir. So first, here's President Trump in that Oval Office meeting a short time ago when he was specifically asked if he's open to deporting more criminal migrants. Here's the Q&A.
You mentioned that you're open to deporting individuals that aren't foreign aliens but are criminals to El Salvador. Does that include potentially U.S. citizens, fully naturalized Americans?
If they're criminals and if they hit people with baseball bats over their head that happen to be 90 years old, and if they rape 87-year-old women in Coney Island, Brooklyn, yeah, that includes them. What do you think? There's a special category of person? They're as bad as anybody that comes in.
Jonathan, safe to say the president was very firm in his message.
Yes, he is very firm on this, and it's having a tremendous effect as we see every single day at the border. Nobody's coming across anymore, and I don't mean literally, but as Bill Maloogian reports daily, the numbers are so small because people know that President Trump will deport them if they're criminals and send them back, or whether to their country or to El Salvador or somewhere else. So it's having a tremendous benefit. And I think one of the things that's interesting with this Maryland man, Mr. Garcia, is what is being talked about. Even if he's returned here, DHS could reopen his case based on change of circumstances and have him removed anyway, because when he was deported, the murder rate in El Salvador was staggeringly high, and now it's dropped 95% from about 2,400 a year down to about 100 or so a year. They have a murder rate equivalent to Sweden, so he would be much safer in El Salvador, arguably, than he was if he was kept here.
Jonathan, President Bukele has said that the U.S. is paying El Salvador a fee of about $6 million to house these gang members in CCOT. I don't know about you, but that seems not like a whole lot of money. So I guess the question is, what's the benefit for El Salvador? What's their incentive to want to house these violent criminals from around the world on behalf of the United States?
It would seem their incentive, assuming the $6 million doesn't mean very much to them, my guess is would be the relationship value with the United States. Also, I think it sends a message, and he's been very clear on this message, that the gang activity in El Salvador is done. He wants it to be a safe country. So I think it sends a message not only within his country, but externally, that gang activity is not tolerated there. But I think mostly it's probably the relationship between him and the United States and him and other countries. And that's probably the main reason he's doing so.
Yeah, Stephen Miller was in that Oval Office meeting. He was also speaking outside of the White House today. And he seems to want to set the record straight that this is criminal migrants and those who are here illegally. Listen.
You seem to be under the impression that El Salvadorians living in our country illegally just get to stay here. They don't. They get arrested and deported. Then the fact that they're MS-13 just puts an extra priority on our deporting them. But we would deport someone to El Salvador regardless of whether or not they're MS-13 if they were here illegally.
Your reaction to that, Jonathan?
Yeah, he's exactly right. There's almost this idea, and you see it in the media, you saw it with the previous administration, that it's people here illegally were presumptively treated as if they have every right to be here and every benefit of the United States, and they certainly don't. And I think this person from El Salvador is such a good example, because if he is a gang member, that's a reason to deport him. But if he's not, it's just as strong of a reason, because there's really no safety risk for him going back there if he's not. So there's really no good argument for him to stay. And the only reason he wants to stay is because it's better for him. And President Trump is making our immigration policy about what's better for the United States citizens, what's better for public safety, and he's been consistent on this all the way through.
I want to get your thoughts on some of the messaging from the Trump administration. They really seem to like to show their work, show the consequences. The last 4 years under the Biden administration, we'd be down at the border and we'd have lines of people, hundreds of people long, literally waving to our cameras in a single file line like they're in line at a theme park. Now we get these images, we were just showing them a moment ago, of people handcuffed, shackled, being put on flights, being stuffed into this notorious mega prison in El Salvador. That's intimidating for people who would maybe want to cross the border. The idea that, hey, I could be one of these guys, I could be sent to El Salvador. Do you think that messaging is in part behind these remarkably low numbers at the border right now?
Yeah, I would think that's one of the biggest factors in it, because it's really pitch perfect. It sends the message, we're done. The Biden open borders, free stuff when you get here is over, and you'll be deported, and you'll be deported in a way that's not convenient for you. So I think it's very good. And all law enforcement, the strongest law enforcement is deterrence. You don't have law enforcement where you catch the bad guy. You want them not to do anything. That's why security, cops on the street, things like that are so strong at sending the message. And the administration has been so effective at that. Without any new resources, they've basically eliminated the problem at the southern border.
Jonathan, great to have you on. Thank you so much.
Thank you.
Let's hear the question from this very low-rated anchor at CB.
Thank you, President Trump. Do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
Well, let me ask Pam, would you answer that question?
Sure, President. First and foremost, he was illegally in our country. He had been illegally in our country. And in 2019, two courts, an immigration court and an appellate immigration court, ruled that he was a member of MS-13 and he was illegally in our country. Right now, it was additional paperwork had needed to be done. That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
So will you return him?
And you are doing a great job. Thank you.
Stephen
Miller, wait a minute. Can you just also respond to that question? Because, it's asked by CNN, and they always ask it with a slant, because they're totally slanted because they don't know what's happening. That's why nobody's watching them. But would you answer that question also, please?
Yes, gladly. So, as Pam mentioned, there's an illegal alien from El Salvador. So, with respect to you, he's a citizen of El Salvador. So it's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point. As 2 immigration courts found that he was a member of MS-13. When President Trump declared MS-13 to be a foreign terrorist organization, that meant that he was no longer eligible under federal law, which I'm sure you know, you're very familiar with the INA, that he was no longer eligible for any form of immigration relief in the United States. So he had a deportation order that was valid, which meant that under our law, he's not even allowed to be present in the United States and had to be returned because of the foreign terrorist designation. This issue was then, by a district court judge, completely inverted, and a district court judge tried to tell the administration that they had to kidnap a citizen of El Salvador and fly him back here. That issue was raised to the Supreme Court, and the Supreme Court said the district court order was unlawful, and its main components were reversed 9-0 unanimously, stating clearly that neither Secretary of State nor the President could be compelled by anybody to forcibly retrieve a citizen of El Salvador from El Salvador, who again is a member of MS-13, which, as I'm sure you understand, rapes little girls, murders women, murders children, is engaged in the most barbaric activities in the world, and I can promise you, if he was your neighbor, you would move right away.
So you don't plan to ask for
Supreme Court's
to get him back?
And what was the ruling in the Supreme Court, Steve? Was it 9-0?
Yes, it was a 9-0
in our favor.
In our favor, against the district court ruling, saying that no district court has the power to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. As Pam said, the ruling solely stated that if this individual, at El Salvador's sole discretion, was sent back to our country, that we could deport him a second time.
Well,
no version of this legally ends up with him ever living here because he is a citizen of El Salvador. That is the president of El Salvador. Your questions about it, per the court, can only be directed to him.
I asked President Bukele, can President Bukele weigh in on this? Do you plan to return him?
Well, I'm supposed to not suggesting that I'll smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
But you can release him inside El Salvador.
Yeah, but I'm not releasing, I mean, we're not very fond of releasing terrorists into our country. I mean, we just turned the murder capital of the world into the safest country in the Western Hemisphere, and you want us to go back into the releasing criminals so we can go back to being the murder capital of the world? No, that's not going to happen.
Well, they'd love to have a criminal, released into
I mean, there's a fascination.
They would love it.
Yeah.
They're sick. These are sick people. Marco, do you have something to say about
Yeah, I mean, Stephen outlined it. I don't understand what the confusion is. This individual is a citizen of El Salvador. He was illegally in the United States and was returned to his country. That's where you deport people, back to their country of origin, except for Venezuela that wasn't refusing to take people back, or places like that. I can tell you this, Mr. President, no, the foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
And that's what the Supreme Court held, by the way, to Marco's point. The Supreme Court said exactly what Marco said, that no court has the authority to compel the foreign policy function of the United States. We won a case 9-0, and people like CNN are portraying it as a loss, as usual, because they want foreign terrorists in the country who kidnap women and children. But President Trump, his policy is foreign terrorists that are here illegally get expelled from the country, which, by the way, is a 90-10 issue.
Well, Mr. President, you said that if the Supreme Court said someone needed to be returned, that you would abide by that. You said that on Air Force One just a few days ago. And they said that it must be facilitated.
Why don't you just say, isn't it wonderful that we're keeping criminals out of our country? Why can't you just say that? Why do you go over and over? And that's why nobody watches you anymore. You have no credibility. Please, go ahead.
President Trump, thank you so much. How many illegal criminals are you planning on exporting to El Salvador? And President Bukele, how many are you willing to take from the U.S.?
As many as possible. And I just asked the president, it's this massive complex that he built, jail complex. I said, can you build some more of them, please? As many as we can get out of our country that were allowed in here by incompetent Joe Biden through open borders. Open borders. You probably hear open borders and you can't even understand it because nobody can understand it. Nobody smart or with common sense can understand it. So we have millions of people that should not be in this country that are dangerous, not just people, because we have people, but we have millions of people that are murderers, drug dealers. They've been allowed to come into our country by other countries that were very smart. When they heard that this very low IQ president, and by the way, I took my cognitive exam as part of my physical exam, and I got the highest mark, and one of the doctors said, "Sir, I've never seen anybody get that kind of, that was the highest mark." I hope you're happy with that, although they haven't been bugging me too much to take a cognitive. But I did do my physical, and it was released. I hope you're all happy with it. I notice there's no question, so probably you are. But the cognitive, they said to me, "Sir, would you like to take a cognitive test?" I said, "Did Biden take one?" "No." "Did anybody take one?" "No, not too many people took them." I said, what about Obama? Did he take one?" "No, he didn't take one either." I said, "Let me be the only one to take one." But I've actually taken them 3 times already. I like taking them because they're not too tough for me to take. But we had a great physical exam, so I know you're going to ask that. And the doctors who are total professionals, Walter Reed Medical Center, they're great people. And I visited a soldier that was badly wounded, incredible soldier, lost his leg, and spent a lot of time with him. I mean, great with his mother, and it was really a very great thing. They do a phenomenal job. I just want to say, Walter Reed, I was there for, 5-6 hours. You were there with me. But I took a full physical, and it came out perfecto, so that's good. It means you've got me for a little longer.
Would the U.S. be willing to pay for those facilities to be opened if new ones were going to be built?
I'd do something. We'd help them out. Yeah, we help them. They're great facilities, very strong facilities, and they don't play games. I'd like to go a step further. I mean, I said it to Pam. I don't know what the laws are. We always have to obey the laws, but we also have homegrown criminals that push people into subways, that hit elderly ladies on the back of the head with a baseball bat when they're not looking, that are absolute monsters. I'd like to include them in the group of people to get them out of the country, but you'll have to be looking at the laws on that, Steve, okay?
Well, I think the conversation is going to be extremely beneficial. El Salvador's been a fantastic partner, and when I was in El Salvador visiting with President Bukele, we talked about the fact that he would accept more flights, would accept more individuals into CCOT. So I'm looking forward to that partnership continuing.
So that was Kristi Noem last hour here on Fox. President Trump's getting ready to welcome the leader of El Salvador to the White House amid the fallout over a man mistakenly deported there. White House argues it does not have to bring him back. Supreme Court says you have to facilitate that. Stephen Miller, White House Deputy Chief of Staff for Policy, Homeland Security Advisor, here to straighten it out. And, sir, good morning to you. Got a couple minutes. I want to motor through a bunch of things here, okay? Here's the argument on topic number 1. DOJ said a federal court cannot compel the executive branch to engage in any mandated act of diplomacy or incursion upon the sovereignty of another nation. So your argument is that you don't have to bring him back home, but will you?
So I want to correct, I hate to do it, Bill, but I got to correct you on every single thing that you said because it was all wrong. First, we won the Supreme Court case, clearly, 9-0. A district court judge said unconscionably that the president and his administration have to go into El Salvador and extradite one of their citizens, an El Salvadorian citizen, so that would be kidnapping, that we have to kidnap an El Salvadorian citizen against the will of his government and fly him back to America, which would be an unimaginable act and an invasion of El Salvador's sovereignty. So we appealed to the Supreme Court, and it said clearly, no district court can compel the president to exercise his Article 2 foreign powers in any way whatsoever. DOJ called me after that Supreme Court ruling, and they said, this is amazing. We won this case 9-0. We are in excellent standing here. So this has been portrayed wrong for 72 hours in the media. They said the most a court could ever compel you to do would be to facilitate return, which would basically mean if El Salvador voluntarily sends him back, we wouldn't block him at the airport. We would put him back into ICE detention, and then he would be deported either back to El Salvador or somewhere else. The Supreme Court said that is the most the government can be expected to do. So we won the case handily. The misreporting on this has been atrocious.
Okay,
Secondly,
I appreciate
he was
the
not, no, Bill, it's important. He was not mistakenly sent to El Salvador.
Okay, so do you still
He's
believe
an illegal
he is a
alien
member of
from
MS?
El Salvador. Hold on, this is important. In 2019, he was ordered deported. He has a final removal order from the United States. These are things that no one disputes. Where is he from? El Salvador. Where is he a resident and citizen of? El Salvador. Is he here illegally? Yes. Does he have a deportation order? Yes. A DOJ lawyer who has since been relieved of duty, a saboteur, a Democrat, put into a filing incorrectly that this was a mistaken removal. It was not. This was the right person sent to the right place. Now, some have said, well, but he had a thing called a withholding order. So a withholding order means you've been ordered deported, but an immigration judge is saying you cannot go back to a particular country. Here's the thing. If you are a member of a foreign terrorist organization, you cannot have a withholding order. Since he's in MS-13, there is no withholding order. Furthermore, the gang that he is accused of being persecuted by doesn't exist anymore in El Salvador. The 18th Street gang is gone. So you have an illegal alien from El Salvador. Bill, where are we supposed to send the illegal alien from El Salvador?
You haven't even allowed me to ask you a question. Are you convinced he is still a member of MS-13? That was your original charge.
Yes. But here's the thing, Bill. Yes, but here, not only am I convinced of it, not only is El Salvador convinced of it, Bill, he's an illegal alien from El Salvador with the deportation order. So his only options in life, Bill, his only options in life are to be deported to El Salvador or to be deported to some other country. That's it. He has a deportation order. So, Bill, you tell me, what country should we deport him to? Tell me, please. Tell me.
So Marco Rubio on Sunday morning said this. On Saturday night, another 10 criminals from MS-13 and Tren de Aragua, foreign terrorist organizations, arrived in El Salvador. The alliance between the president and president of El Salvador has become an example for security and prosperity in our hemisphere. So I don't know if this comes up today. I imagine it will. Is Gitmo still open? Are there any illegal immigrants who have been taken to Guantanamo Bay today, or has that prison been closed?
No, it's wide open. Gitmo is open. There are a number of foreign terrorist aliens that are being housed at Gitmo, awaiting final removal to another destination. But what I want to be very clear on,
Can you tell me how many?
No, I cannot. That's operationally sensitive information.
Dozens or more?
It's a large number. The exact number is operationally sensitive to do with military and other considerations relating to the security of those who are there and the security of those who are operating the facility. But I want to be very, very clear about this, Bill. We've been living through a hoax. Nobody was mistakenly sent to El Salvador. He was ordered deported from this country in 2019. He's an illegal alien. His home nation is El Salvador. That is where he belongs. An illegal alien from El Salvador gets sent to El Salvador. When you have a withholding order, to be clear, that does not pause your deportation. In other words, in the worst case scenario, it means you get deported to another country. It means you get deported to Africa or get deported to Asia or you get deported to the Middle East. It doesn't mean you don't get deported. Either way, you're detained and deported. But in this case, because the withholding order doesn't apply to members who are of foreign terrorist organizations, that is obviated. By the way, this is an immigration court under the control and direction of the Department of Justice, not an Article 3 court. It's an Article 2 court. Additionally, as I mentioned, the gang, the cross-rival gang that he says was coming after him, so he's an MS-13. He's saying, well, he was going to be persecuted by the 18th Street gang. That gang doesn't exist anymore in El Salvador. What are we supposed to do, Bill? Keep all the world's terrorists on our soil forever? If you're here illegally, you're going to get sent home.
So quickly,
and I'm sorry to everyone that you've been living through this media hoax. And we won the Supreme Court case. They overturned the ruling of the district court and said clearly that no administration can be compelled to engage in foreign policy to extradite a citizen of another country.
I want to squeeze this in. The activists from Columbia University won a case there from a judge saying you can be deported. There'll be an appeals process that could go on for some time. Will Mahmoud Khalil be deported from the United States? Quick answer on that, please.
Yes, he will, as will anyone who preaches hate for America. His organization said they wanted to eradicate Western civilization. Look, under this country, under this administration, under President Trump, people who hate America, who threaten our citizens, who rape, who murder, and who support those who rape and murder are going to be ejected from this country. And I just wish a fraction of the media outrage that we had over deporting terrorists and deporting monsters and deporting their sympathizers from this country was spent crying over the blood that was shed of American women and children over the last 4 years, or crying over the 500,000 children that Biden trafficked into this country, or crying over the neighborhoods destroyed by gangs and drugs and fentanyl. Cemeteries are filled with tombstones from Americans that were killed by Joe Biden and Mayorkas and his administration, suffering beyond imagination. We just arrested an illegal alien who committed sex crimes against 20 children. Sex crimes against 20 children freed by a sanctuary city. So I'll reserve my sympathy and my empathy for the Americans being brutalized by these monsters, and we will not apologize for getting these monsters the hell out of our country, Bill.
Stephen Miller, thank you for your time. I'm out of time today. We will speak again. Thank you, sir,
Thank you.
from the North Lawn.
So the Trump administration pushing back against a federal judge insisting that they have no duty to return the Maryland man who was deported last month in El Salvador's prison, saying in a court filing Sunday, quote, the federal courts have no authority to direct the executive branch to conduct foreign relations in a particular way or engage with a foreign sovereign in a given manner. This as President Trump is set to discuss deportations of criminal migrants with El Salvador's president today. Let's bring in Fox News legal analyst Greg Jarrett. Greg, I was going through this filing yesterday. I mean, just brutal blows to the courts as well as the plaintiff here, essentially telling them, try us. You really don't have the authority. The Supreme Court said that when it comes to diplomatic measures, that's all for the executive, right?
Oh, you're right, Lawrence. I mean, the Supreme Court said the Trump administration should make an effort to facilitate Garcia's release from custody in El Salvador. Now, that's very different than ordering his physical return to the United States. The difference in semantics is important, which is why the High Court was so critical of Judge Zinnes for using unclear language, told her you got to be more precise. And then at the same time, the justices gave her a basic law school tutorial, reminding her, hey, the executive branch conducts foreign policy, not judges, not you, and you must give deference to that fundamental constitutional principle, which means all she can really do is order that Garcia's immigration status be changed so that he could conceivably be readmitted to the United States if and only if El Salvador chooses to release him. Other than that, you have no power, but she doesn't seem to get it.
You know, Greg, I did find it very troubling. I feel like the Supreme Court gave a gentle nudge to the judge to say, listen, the motion that you filed, you know, technically, this is not how it's supposed to be done. They said that in the documents, but the judge responded to the defendants in the case with this authority, it was almost arrogant after she got a talking to essentially from the Supreme Court. Am I missing something?
No, you nailed it, Lawrence. I mean, I was shocked. She not only sort of ignored the Supreme Court and defied the Supreme Court, but then she became even more strident.
Right.
And as I say, she doesn't seem to comprehend that she has no power over foreign policy, which is what the justices were trying to not so subtly explain to her. She has no jurisdiction over somebody held in a foreign country. Why? Because she has no power to tell a sovereign country what to do. Now, the U.S. can exert some diplomatic influence if it wants, but that's the sole province of the president, the chief executive, the State Department. She cannot legally order Trump officials to engage in diplomacy or some foreign incursion if she wants to go that far. So the bottom line is, you know, she can verbally upbraid the Justice Department, State Department, all she wants, but she cannot dictate foreign policy by judicial threats. And if she tries to hold Trump officials in contempt, I guarantee you it'll be quickly appealed, and I suspect she'll be slapped down for abusing her own authority.
I only got about 25 seconds, Greg. I guess the big question is, how does this end? Where does this go from? Will this land itself back in the Supreme Court where they have to do an even more stern order?
Yeah, you know, I think so. Judge Zinnes is typical of too many judges. You know, they put on a black robe, they sit on an elevated bench, they bang the gavel, and they think their power is limitless. And if she continues down this road in such an aggressive manner, I mean, I think the Supreme Court is going to have to step in and be more aggressive in telling her what she can and cannot do. So, collision course straight ahead.
I can't wait for it because she's not getting the message thus far. Greg, thanks so much.
My pleasure. Thanks, Lawrence.
Maryland, that is getting a lot of attention this hour. The Supreme Court ruling that Kilmar Abrego Garcia, one of the 260 alleged gang members deported to El Salvador last month, should return to the United States or could return to the United States. Now, the administration says that he was mistakenly deported, but insists that he is a member of MS-13. He denies that. During Trump's meeting with El Salvador President Bukele earlier today, the administration was pressed about bringing him back to the United States. Watch.
That's up to El Salvador if they want to return him. That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
The question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
Interesting answer there. Okay, with that, we bring in border czar Tom Homan. Tom, welcome back. Great to have you with us today. Your thoughts on this exchange, Pam Bondi involved, President Bukele involved today in the discussion of this Maryland man?
Well, I think Pam Bondi's right. You know, he's a El Salvadoran national, born in El Salvador. He's in El Salvador's custody. So El Salvador would have to agree to release him. It doesn't sound like they're going to. And if we did get him back in the United States, he's going to be detained. He's an MS-13 gang member based on our intelligence and El Salvador's intelligence. So he's been designated terrorist, so he's going to be locked up regardless. So I agree with Pam Bondi. I think we can facilitate return if El Salvador wants to send him back, but I don't think Bukele's going to do that at all.
Yeah. This is another moment from that same meeting in the Oval Office today. President Trump asked if whether he would deport non-foreign aliens, citizens in this case. So just watch this and I'd like to get your reaction to this.
You mentioned that you're open to deporting individuals that aren't foreign aliens but are criminals to El Salvador. Does that include potentially U.S. citizens, fully naturalized Americans?
Why do you think there's special category of person? They're as bad as anybody that comes in. We have bad ones too. And I'm all for it. If it's a homegrown criminal, I have no problem.
Can you describe like who would fall into that category and what the president was referring to there, Tom?
You know, Martha, I don't know. I haven't had that discussion with the president. I've been on the road. I just got home like an hour ago, so I haven't had a discussion with the president or the DHS secretary, so I'm going to have to pass on that question.
Okay, that's fine. It sort of came out of nowhere, the question, so I wondered if you knew something that we didn't know on that. I also thought this was really an important moment with the El Salvadoran president when he talked about the people that he has taken into this prison, and he gave this example. Watch.
We even had this gang member from Venezuela, one of the ones you sent. He said, oh, well, you know, I got arrested 6 times, but they released me the 6th time, so I should be released again. And then I said, well, what's the last thing you do? And he said, well, I shot a cop in the leg, but I didn't kill him. I just shot him in the leg.
That's pretty stunning admission when he says this is one of the guys that they talked to that they brought into that prison.
Well, look, I stand by the fact that every one of these people removed out of El Salvador is a significant public safety threat and a terrorist. I mean, MS-13 and Tren has both been designated terrorists. I think Bukele's been a great partner in the United States. It's just not he's helping us with MS-13 members that MS-13 was born in that country. But MS-13 is in several different countries around the globe. And I think Bukele is stepping up to eradicate MS-13 no matter where they are. So he's going to assist the United States and get them out of here. The crime rate in El Salvador has plummeted over 90% because of President Bukele, locking up 1,000 MS-13 members. He's not going to be happy to every MS-13 member that came out of El Salvador is rounded up across the globe and sent to El Salvador. That's the type of president he is, and I got to respect that.
Talk to us a little bit about the effort to move people out of this country. Criminals first, the worst first, as you have said all along. But other people who get picked up in these efforts as well. How is it going numbers-wise? We haven't seen numbers in a while. Can you characterize the progress for us this afternoon?
Well, the interior ICE arrest number is about 58,000, a majority of them being criminals, according to the numbers I saw yesterday. Look, the majority is criminals, but here's what you and I talked about several times. When sanctuary cities release a criminal back into the community, that forces us to go into the community and find him. And when we find him, we normally will, many times they're with others. Others that are in the United States illegally, but may not be a criminal public safety threat target. But we're not going to tell ICE to walk away from illegal alien like the last administration did. The last administration told ICE you can't arrest somebody for being here illegally unless they're getting convicted of a serious crime. That's not what the law says. We're not going to tell immigration enforcement officers, you know what, ignore the oath we took, ignore the immigration law, and walk away. So I've said it many times, sanctuary cities are going to get exactly what they don't want. More agents in your community, because you're forcing this in the community, not because on the whole team look for the bad guy. It means more collateral arrest. If they simply let us in a taxpayer-funded jail, one agent could arrest one criminal alien, but they don't do that. So that's why the collateral numbers continue to rise, because we're forcing the community.
Yeah, Tom, you've spent a lot of time, too much time, with angel moms and angel families. And you saw Rachel Moore in the beginning, and you and I talk this afternoon as this jury is about to start deliberating her suspected killer's fate. And you heard her mom, Rachel Moore, say in that soundbite, you know, if only someone had done a DNA swab on him, they would have discovered that he was wanted for murder in El Salvador and not let him go free. This is in the prior administration. Your thoughts as we wait for this jury's deliberations on this case?
Well, first of all, I met Rachel Moore several times, and it's never easy. You're right. I met too many angel moms and dads who buried their children. A preventable crime because the illegal aliens should never been there. So a heartbreaking story, every one of them. But I met Rachel Moore, and what a sweet lady, and what a tragedy she's dealing with. But you're exactly right. When I was with the Fox Network for the last 4 years, I was complaining every day that they're releasing people into this country without proper vetting. Secretary Mayorkas says, well, they're all vetted. No, they're not, because you don't have access to other countries' criminal databases. So we misled the American people, and as we see, we're arresting thousands of foreign nationals of criminal histories in other countries. Unfortunately, they get here and they commit a crime against U.S. citizens. They rape and murder young ladies. They burned a lady alive on a subway. It's just, you know, it's just constant. But President Trump made a promise to American people: we're going to find these foreign national public safety threats and eradicate them from this country. And that's exactly what we're doing. In the first 2 months, we arrested more criminal alien threats in this country in 2 months than Joe Biden did in a year. Border numbers down 95%. And ICE is out there arresting criminal aliens 24/7 across this country. And we're going to keep the president's promise to eradicate criminal aliens from this country.
Well, we don't want any more angel moms or Rachel Morans in the club, and I know you feel that way, and we commend you for the work that you're doing, and we are grateful to have you here today. Thank you very much. The Borders are Tom Homan. Thank you, Tom.
Thank you, Martha. Live from Texas, this is The Will Cain Show. And in our nation's capital today, a visitor from what was once known as the murder capital of the world, El Salvador's President Nayib Bukele, and President Trump teaming up to crack down on crime in what became yet another must-watch Oval Office meeting. Here's a bit of how it started.
And, you know, sometimes they say that we imprisoned thousands. I like to say that we actually liberated millions. So, you know, like...
It's very good. Who gave him that line? Do you think I can use that?
Yes. And in fact, Mr. President, you have 350 million people to liberate. Yeah. But to liberate 350 million people, you have to imprison some. You know, that's the way it works, right? You cannot just, you know, free the criminals and think crime's going to go down magically.
Imprisoning thousands to liberate millions. It didn't take long, though, for the media to dig into one of its favorite stories, the, quote, Maryland man who was deported back to El Salvador.
Do you plan to ask President Bukele to help return the man who your administration says was mistakenly deported? The man who was mistakenly deported to El Salvador?
And here's how the Trump team responded to that.
That's not up to us. The Supreme Court ruled, President, that if, as El Salvador wants to return him, this is international matters, foreign affairs, if they wanted to return him, we would facilitate it, meaning provide a plane.
He's a citizen of El Salvador. So It's very arrogant even for American media to suggest that we would even tell El Salvador how to handle their own citizens as a starting point.
The foreign policy of the United States is conducted by the President of the United States, not by a court. And no court in the United States has a right to conduct the foreign policy of the United States. It's that simple. End of story.
It was El Salvador's president who said he lacks the power to, quote, smuggle someone back into the United States.
I'm supposed to not suggesting that I smuggle a terrorist into the United States, right?
It's always
how can I smuggle? How can I return him to the United States? Like I smuggle him into the United States, or what do I do? Of course, I'm not going to do it. It's like, I mean, the question is preposterous. How can I smuggle a terrorist into the United States? I don't have the power to return him to the United States.
So what happens now? Joining me to discuss all of this, DHS Assistant Secretary for Public Affairs, Tricia McLaughlin. Tricia, thank you for being with us today. Let's start with the case that everyone asks about, and we end there with both the El Salvadorian president and the president of the United States and his cabinet discussing the quote-unquote Maryland man, Abrego Garcia. What then does that leave his status? It seems it would be his status will remain in El Salvador.
Yeah, absolutely. Well, I think that this illegal alien is exactly where he belongs, home in El Salvador. He was in our country illegally. He's from El Salvador, was born in El Salvador. And oh, the media forgot to mention he is an MS-13 gang member. The media would love for you to believe that this is a media darling, that he's just some Maryland father. Well, Osama bin Laden was also a father, and yet he wasn't a good guy. And they actually are both terrorists. He should be in this El Salvador prison for terrorists, and I hope he will remain there. And good on President Bukele.
What is the current status of deportations? Are we still sending men? I heard Stephen Miller this morning on with America's Newsroom. We're still using Guantanamo Bay. We're still sending people to El Salvador. I would assume those are people that the administration has deemed as members of MS-13 or some other international terrorist organization. Tell me the current process of deporting people like the man you send back to El Salvador.
Well, as Secretary Noem noted in the recent cabinet meeting, our deportation numbers have almost doubled in the last few weeks. So we're very optimistic. Our ICE operations, they're people are ready to go. They're no longer being hamstrung by the Biden administration. People are back on the job, able to really be empowered to go out there and arrest these criminal aliens. You know, Will, it's disgusting what I see coming behind my desk. These rapists, murderers, child predators who have just been allowed to sit in our country without our ICE agents being able to arrest them. And actually, President Trump and Secretary Noem are going after them and getting them out of our country.
And of course, the initial crime that everyone is focused on is actually the one that brings them here in the first place, which is illegal immigration. President Bukele talked about that. He talked about some of the people he's interviewed that are in prison now in El Salvador. Watch.
We even had this gang member from Venezuela, one of the ones you sent, and we interviewed him just, to get some information, etc. from them. And he said, oh, well, I got arrested 6 times, but they released me the 6 times, so I should be released again. And then we said, well, what's the last thing you do? And he said, well, I shot a cop in the leg, but I didn't kill him. So he's not getting released. But the last time he shot a cop, actually, and he shot him in the leg. So these are, like you said, there's something broken.
Arrested 6 times. He tells the story there of the last crime he committed was shooting a cop in his leg.
Yeah, really without any repercussions under the Biden-Harris administration. But Secretary Noem went to El Salvador. She went to CCOT, which is that notorious prison, and went face-to-face with these members of Tren de Aragua and these members of MS-13. And they won't come out. They will stay there, and they will not terrorize American communities anymore. That's what President Trump promised the American people, and that's what Secretary Noem is so brilliantly executing on.
Okay. Tricia McLaughlin, we appreciate you being with us today and helping us understand the policies and following this meeting between President Bukele and President Trump. Thank you.
Absolutely.
President Trump in the Oval Office today. Let's bring in Fox News chief political analyst Britt Hume. Britt, good evening. We've been focused on this El Salvadoran illegal immigrant who was deported, said to be a member of MS-13. The administration had said that it was an administrative error because there was an immigration judge in the past that had said he can't go back because of rival gangs in the country. Now, the Supreme Court has said that the administration is to facilitate his return. Where do you see this and what the response was today?
It's a bit of a gray area, Brett, but it is important to note that the administration was told by the Supreme Court, or the ruling by the Supreme Court said the administration should facilitate his return. It didn't say it should effectuate it or bring it about. And there are obvious reasons for that. The principal one being that he's now in the custody of another government of the sovereign country of El Salvador, of which he's a citizen, and the Supreme Court's jurisdiction doesn't apply there. So all it can do is tell the administration to try to bring him back, but it can't go much beyond that because you're dealing here with foreign policy issues and with foreign relations, and the Supreme Court really has almost no, if any, jurisdiction over that. So what the Supreme Court did was to go about as far as I think it could. Now, the question is bound to be asked at this hearing tomorrow, if the administration actually made a formal request to El Salvador to bring this man back to this country, or at least to take him out of El Salvador. And I don't know what the answer to that is going to be, but the El Salvadoran president was pretty strong in the Oval Office today in saying that he wasn't about to release this man from custody in El Salvador. So this may turn out to be something that was done by this administration in error, sending him there, which is it has admitted, but it may not be anything that may now be beyond the reach of the courts.
Right. So you're saying if President Trump asked the leader of El Salvador to release him or facilitate, they would facilitate the return, that one would think that he would.
Well, you'd think so, because the relationship between this president and the El Salvadoran president is pretty tight, as we could tell by their presence together in the Oval Office today. Mm-hmm. And I think that question will be asked. It was asked by a reporter, not by the Trump administration, if he would send the guy back. He said he wouldn't, but we don't know whether the administration has actually asked to have him come back, or at least to have him released to U.S. custody. So.
Quickly,
we'll see,
Britt,
but
you know, on the issue of immigration, though, it is definitive that President Trump and his administration are winning on this issue across the board.
Yeah, I think, Brett, that what's important here is that we've been talking about the legalities of this, but the politics of this are pretty clear. The administration is succeeding broadly. The southern border as an entry point has been reduced to a mere trickle. That's a unmistakable success of this administration, done without any of the new laws that the Biden administration said it would have to do that. And so I think and it's also popular. The public wants illegal immigration stopped, halted, and they're worried about the immigrants that are already here, and the administration's trying to get rid of them. On political terms, I think it's a huge winner for the administration. There may be some friction with the courts right at the moment, but politically speaking, he's got the high ground right now on this issue.
Britt, as always, thank you.
Hey, Sean Hannity here. Hey, click here to subscribe to Fox News YouTube page and catch our hottest interviews and most compelling analysis. You will not get it anywhere else.